Let's do it.
All right, welcome to Coffee Talk Tuesday. My name is Shalise Stevens, and I'm here with Trip Mitchell, my co-host, and our guest today, Shawn Newell. Thank you so much, Shawn, for being on our show.
Great, thank you for having me.
So Shawn is a former U of U football player, and I just confessed to Shawn that I worked at the UNLV football program, which compared to U of U is the doormat. So they always looked up when we played the University of Utah. And Shawn has done a great job transitioning, and he's a pillar of industry, a pillar of the community.
Yep.
And so, Shawn, you have decided to make Utah your home. And you originally, if I'm correct, you grew up in Southern California.
Yes.
And matriculated to the U of U, and now it's your home. What about Utah makes it so special for you and your family?
Well, now it's because I have a number of family members here with my kids and my grandkids. But my wife and I did not plan on staying here. My wife's from Southern California as well. And we tried to leave as soon as I graduated, but didn't find the right job opportunities. And we were expecting our first child. And we thought, well, we better have a paycheck before we go off running someplace and not be able to survive. So we decided to stay.
That. Yeah, I understand that. I moved back here right before I had my daughter. We were only going to be here for 6 months, and she turned 12 in March.
Well, it could be Shalise is just bad at math.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Every season is a year, just to let you know.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, we're there to help.
Well, Shawn, you also played for the Chicago Bears, is that correct?
Well, I was on the team for a year. I was injured my very first year, and my injuries just I couldn't recover, so I had to resign. And, I determined early on that I was going to resign instead of being waived, because waive means goodbye, and resign means there's still a little glimmer of hope. So well, that was a long time ago.
Shalise, a lot of people think that if you've got an opportunity to play pro football, it's a great living. It is anything but a great living. And especially, Shawn, when you played, you probably didn't, your contract was maybe $125,000, which sounds like a lot of money. But
no, not even that much. Our rookie contracts were $40,000 a year, and you got a $20,000 bump every year after that. And even the guys who were making large amounts of money back then, in comparison today, it wasn't even close. Our first round draft pick signed for, I think it was $1.7 million back when I was playing. This was in 1983, 84. And everybody thought that was outrageous. And now, guys they'd hang up the phone on you if you said you'd give them $1.7 million. So it was a big difference.
The one thing about football, as opposed to baseball, basketball, or hockey, in those three sports, the money is guaranteed. When you sign, they are going to pay you that money. In football, except for just a handful of quarterbacks, that money is not guaranteed. So they can cut you at any point if you get hurt.
Yep.
It is a horrible, horrible business for the players. So the only reason I bring that up is mamas and daddies, don't have your sons grow up to be football players. Unless they're a quarterback.
I beg to differ. I do it all over again, so I beg to differ.
Well, it's experience and it's living life, right?
Yeah,
you got to take those
without
chances.
a doubt.
One of my buddies got cut in the parking lot he played at Purdue.
Oh.
And he was 6'5" and 300 pounds, but he did not have blazing speed. His 40 time was 4 minutes. And he jokes that he got cut in the parking lot. He made it a couple days in, but his goal was to play for he grew up in Chicago, and his goal was to play for the Bears, and he didn't make it. But hey, he got a college scholarship, and that's what it's all about. It's graduation. And you not only graduated from the community college, but and then you got a master's degree. So you strongly believe in education.
Oh, without a doubt. It took me a few years. I did it kind of backwards. I graduated from the U first, and then I went to Salt Lake Community College.
That is the other way.
Yes.
Just with Shalise, I have to tell her some things. But
well, it was interesting. My first 2 years of college, I thought that I had gone to the most ultimate party in life, and I didn't do very well in my classes, and it came back to bite me a little bit. But my last 2 years, I really fought to graduate, And when I started my career in sales at Industrial Supply, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what sales and marketing or any of those things were. So I decided that I'd go find a way to get trained. So I looked up Salt Lake Community College. They had a marketing management program, and I dove in head first. And that was one of the greatest experiences and the greatest choices I'd ever made in my life to do that.
Because that's rare for someone who's had success on the field, and you're a charming guy. People probably like you right off the bat. But most people don't realize that marketing and sales is a profession, and there's some key things that you've got to learn.
Big time. And it's not easy. Everybody not everybody, but sales gets a pretty bad name out there. But if you really look at it, we're all being marketed to and we're all being sold to every single day. And to understand the nuances of sales and marketing is tough, not just to know it, but to be able to implement the skill sets that are necessary to have customers believe in you and trust in you and value you, and to bring something to the table for them as well. So I really get a lot out of it. And I take a lot of pride in being in this position.
So the example, I worked for a big industrial company at one point, and the example they told us is, if you're a sales rep, the day after the Super Bowl, you're going in to talk to a buyer. And this buyer might see 12 or 14 sales reps over the course of the day, and you want to talk to that person first about the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Well, by the second or third rep that comes in, they've talked all they want. And so my company, they believe that you go in and you talk about your products, goods, and services, all the stuff that we learn first. And then you try to read the client, and if they want to do small talk afterwards, which is the opposite of how I conduct things.
Yeah.
I like to have fun first and do the work later. But they talk to professionalism of sales. And in the field of pro sports, I get a lot of people, being a sportscaster for a number of years, people saying, how do I work for teams? And you can work for any professional sports team in the world if you can do one thing, and that's sell. If you go in as an intern and you can sell tickets or advertising packages, that's hard to do. But if you can do it, you can climb any organization.
Yeah. I'm actually taking the marketing and business program right now at Slick as well. And I agree with you, Shawn. Like, I love sales and marketing so much. And I never thought that I would necessarily like sales, but it's so much fun. And now with the marketing, that's what you do, is you just learn how to sell a product in the best way. So,
Shawn, what's the biggest thing you learned at the community college about sales and marketing?
It's probably making sure that you put all the knowledge that you learned during your coursework together through all the courses into a package that works for you. You can't really sell or market anything trying to do it the way somebody else wants to do it. As a team, you figure that out, but for the most part, you have to come up with your own style. You have to come up with your own ideas and your own plan and set forth to do it in a manner that's comfortable to you and that's enjoyable. Because if you don't enjoy it, it's going to show when you're out there in front of people. It's going to show in your work. And I think that's one of the key things that I've learned. And the group aspect there at the college really makes that possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that that's so true too, because then you brand yourself. So you learn how to brand all these other companies and all these other things that you're doing. But during that process, you learn how to brand yourself, which speaks to your skills and what you can do, and where you can shine, basically.
I worked with a narcissistic station manager down in Vegas, and she would give an award to the employees if they did a great job. They got to have dinner with her. And we tried to explain to her that, as wonderful as she was, and that's our last thought before we go to bed and our first in the morning, how wonderful Shenandoah was. But for a 25-year-old production guy at a TV station to go to a $100 dinner with Red was not. She had red hair as well. It was crazy. But Industrial Supply, tell our viewers and listeners what you do as a company.
We are an industrial distribution company. We're about 103 years old, almost 104 years old, still family owned, fourth generation. And we supply products mostly consumable products to industry. So aerospace companies, construction companies, manufacturers of all different types. We supply the products that they need to make the products that they provide to us as consumers.
And you're a vice president there, and what's your job there?
I'm over our business development, so I'm a glorified salesperson. But I also get to really dive deep into the marketing part of our business and to go out and try to find new pieces of business for the company.
That's fantastic. So your expense account is bigger than mine.
No, I don't. I don't spend too much out there, trying to wine and dine.
It's funny. The company I worked for, the one thing you could get fired for was not spending every dime of your expenses every month.
Yeah.
And so we had $2,000 to spend on clients every month.
Wow.
And they give you a company credit card, and I got to admit that was fun. A lot of jazz games you can go to.
Right.
Yeah.
See, that's why we just need to put our budget up, so then we can start, having more fun with our clients.
Well, Keisha is nice enough to help us on some of our shows, and she's doing an amazing job. So, but a big part of your life is giving back to the state of Utah. Can you talk about what the favorite things you get to do from that perspective?
I get joy out of everything that I do to bring, first of all, to evoke change within our communities, to help bring our communities together, and to also serve in different areas. I do a little too much, my wife says sometimes, but I always tell her that, the greatest rewards that I can take away from my life will be that I left a touch somewhere on somebody else's life and was a positive influence. So I spent a lot of time working in education, in the civil rights area, and just community connections and bridge building.
Well, we are at a tumultuous time in our country's history. And what would you say that the biggest lesson that you would like people who maybe haven't followed what's been going on, or maybe are taken back a little bit by the protesters, what would you say to those people?
It's been a real hard one for me, because this isn't different from anything that's been going on for the last 400 some odd years. We keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And you know what they say about if we don't change something, we will continue to repeat things over and over again. We really have to, as a society, take a look at the history and where the issues are buried that cause these types of concerns. And now through technology, the boiling points that were percolating underneath the surface have come to arise. And to some people, it feels like, oh, this is one incident. This is the Mr. George and his issues, that incident that took place. That's what did it. No, this is all stemming from systemic fatigue and burden and basically a kind of PTSD that these communities have been feeling that has now risen to the top. And now that it's becoming more visible, people are saying, well, wait a minute, this can't be the way it is. But if you take a look at history and you do your homework and you delve into our society and the systemic issues that have created these environments, you start to see this is where it comes from. These things have always been here. And what it is now that's getting people's attention is that visibility. Until you can really see something, you don't really believe it's going on. And I think right now that people can see it and they're feeling it within their bones. Now people want to step up and say something, or they want to.
Well, you hit the nail on the head with technology. The Rodney King, if there was no video, that doesn't happen.
Yep.
And if now with the personification of video, it would seem to me that any officer who doesn't turn his body cam on, should not get paid for that shift.
Yeah, they're going to have to figure out some means of punishment. My mother and I were talking the other day. I wrote on Facebook, I think it was, a little story about when I was a teenager coming from football practice. I had a beanie on and my cut off thermos, and I'm driving home, but to drive home, I had to drive in through a predominantly affluent neighborhood and then go through a country club, and the road went through the country club, and then back up to the other side of the golf course, which was where I lived. And I was driving, same speed, had my AM radio because it was a 67 Valiant that I was driving.
Oh, you were
three on the tree.
A Valiant is not the Detroit word for Ferrari.
No. No. But, and I passed some police officers going in the opposite direction. There were two of them in the car. And I knew the moment that they looked over that they were going to come and pull me over. And so I knew not to be pulled over in that neighborhood. So I took off. And my Valiant, of course, had a top speed of 35. So I was doing top speed. And I wasn't going to stop until I got home, which was just a couple of blocks from there on the other side of the golf course. And they were in full lights chasing me. I did not pull over until I got in front of my home. And when I got in front of my home, they pulled me out of the car at gunpoint and laid me down. And my neighbors came out. My mother came out. That's the first time I ever heard my mother say some of the words that she said when she jumped off the porch. And they looked at her and they said, "Stay back. This kid stole his car." And she said, "That's my husband's car. How is he going to steal my husband's car?" And they didn't say a word. They put their guns away, got in the car, and drove off.
Oh.
And those are the type of experiences that a lot of us have that grew up in those communities. And there's many more. And, from that day on, and even before that, I knew that I had to be a part of some semblance of change. I kind of went off different ways every once in a while. And, I took some time off to raise my kids and everything, but I taught them about the concerns that we have as citizens of this country where we're not really treated as equals, and the things that they were going to have to watch out for, the things that they could not do that others could do. My kids went to Brighton High School, and I told them, I says, "Hey, look, you can't do what your classmates do. It's sad, it's burdensome, and it's hard, but you have to live a different life. You have to walk in a different path, and you have to do that for your own safety and security, and so that I don't have to be as concerned when you walk outside this door." So those were some of the drivers that I had growing up.
Wow, that hits me so hard. And on that note, I think we should take a short break, and I want to talk more about this subject when we come back.
Great.
All right, welcome back to Coffee Talk Tuesday. We are here with Shawn Newell. My name is Shalise, and I'm here with Trip, my co-host.
But it's Monday.
It is Monday because we record a week in advance, so I can get all of our, stuff put together. Which I'm still working on the one for tomorrow.
So you were lying to our viewers and listeners. You said Coffee Talk Tuesday.
It is Coffee Talk Tuesday.
But if we recorded on Monday, anyway, go ahead. Sorry. I'm off on a tangent. Shawn, getting back to your experience, having kids has got to be so tough. We had a young man on one of our shows last week who his father is the president of Liberia, been on the U.S. national men's soccer team, is a stud, and he is concerned about going out and not being pulled over. And in New York, we had something that is so terrible as far as I'm concerned, and that was stop and frisk.
Mm-hmm.
That policy gave police basically a freebie to stop and frisk any black youth they saw. And the numbers between the black youth and the white youth, it was astounding. Mm-hmm. That's probably a big reason why Bloomberg, he tested the water to become president, and that stop and frisk was the one thing that probably prevented him from having any traction. Working with the NAACP, talk about how that one policy set back relations between African Americans and the police in New York for a lot of years.
Well, what it did, and I don't know all the details, but I know from talking to people in my community, what it did was just gave license to what was already going on. And it just said, look, we're not going to worry about your complaints. when somebody stops you and frisks you. We're not going to worry about them emptying your backpack on the sidewalk. We're not going to worry about them delaying you from, getting to where you need to go just simply based on the color of your skin. That was the biggest concern. We already knew that it was happening, but to give free license to do so was significant. And there you just start to really trigger the fears of people and saying, now we know dang well that no matter what we do, they're going to come get us. And you cannot function that way and to be your whole self and to feel valued as a person when that environment exists around you.
Wow. I've had a lot of conversations on this topic, and being a white girl, I didn't realize, and from not from Utah, but like living in Utah for so many years, and this topic doesn't come up as frequently as it would perhaps in New York or other places. Like, you don't see it as much, and like I wasn't raised to be racist, so it's not even like something that really has been put on the forefront of my conversations and my life until now. Like, I mean, you talk about it, and of course you raise your kids, you don't see color and all that stuff. My kids have different ethnicities as friends and everything like that, and they don't see color. So it's so, I think, especially with people that don't understand the depth of this, it's really just bringing all of that up, and it's so horrifying to me actually when I'm hearing these stories. And so I run a nonprofit and Rainy Days Foundation. One of my heart moms that I met in Atlanta, it's a African American family, and her story, I didn't even know this about them, but when she was trying to get a heart transplant for her son, she got the worst comments for her. I don't even think it was GoFundMe at that time, but for what she did. And it, like, why would you try to save that child and all this like horrible stuff? And that was like the breaking point for me, because I'd heard stories, and just like you were saying, like your conversations with your kids are way different than the conversations I have with my kids. And I didn't even realize that. And so I think that this is such a great opportunity for us to start having these hard conversations, or the things that you can just push under the rug and not talk about. We should be talking about them.
Yeah, that's.
And I love what you said in your post, sorry, that, what can we do? So what can we do?
Well, you hit it on the head when you said, let's have the hard conversations. You also mentioned that you tell your kids not to see color. That's not what people who are different from one another want. We want you to see the value of us at who we are as we are in front of you. And, going back to the hard questions, the reason hard questions are so difficult for people to converse about and have dialogue about is that you have to self-reflect. And when you self-reflect, you find yourself guilty sometimes of not doing what you need to do in the moment. For example, I can probably bet dollars to donuts that the three of you have probably had some sort of racist statement made in front of you that you heard. And you determine that, that's not me, so I'm not going to say anything, and you let it go by. But in reality, to make change happen, you have to say, hold on a minute. I need to talk to you about what you just said. Go and give to me the reasoning behind what you just stated. And then you're starting to get that conversation. But I bet they won't feel comfortable in doing so, because now you've put somebody on the spot. Right. And to be on the spot is where we need to be able to start having these true, authentic conversations about the incidents that are taking place in our environments. We all are leaders on earth. We all have an opportunity to take one element of our society and make a change, positive or negative. You pick which side you're going to go to. But we all have that opportunity to create dialogue through the connections that we have with others. And it's important that we ask those hard questions to each other. Don't be fearful to ask, people from the African American community hard questions. We want to give you our perspective. We want to share with you where we stand. And to this day, people are afraid to ask. They're afraid to ask me, and I'll talk about almost anything. Yeah, but they're afraid to ask me, you know, where do you stand on this? What are your experiences? Because once I tell my experiences and they have to hear it and listen and learn from it, now that little seed is planted inside of them. And what I hope is that that little seed grows to where there's compassion and some heartfelt understanding for where others come from, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick did something that was amazingly brave of him to do, and it cost him his NFL career.
Mm-hmm.
He has not been signed since those days. Are we going to look at him as our version of, let's say, John Carlos, and who did the Black Power salute at the '68 Olympics in Mexico City? Is he going to be a hero for the Black community?
Well, he is. And one of the things that was just so sad about that whole situation is what he did was taken fully out of context, because the powers that be did not know how to deal with that issue at that time. And without having an understanding of how to deal with it, they had to shift the narrative. And we run into that on a consistent basis, where the narrative of the message that we try to send out as communities that are marginalized are shifted and is turned to make it into a negative. He had nothing against the flag of the United States. He was making a statement about the treatment of people in his community and communities like his. And it just saddened me to no end to have to go through this big old giant thing, and for him to lose his career when he was just trying to make a simple point. Now, a lot of people argue that he was working and he was getting paid. He's a millionaire and he doesn't have any place in doing that. He had the greatest place in doing that because he had the most influence and impact available to him to get that message across.
Yeah. Well, that's what the point that you bring up, the shift of topic, the shift of conversation. That's what I feel is happening when there are riots and looting and everything. I feel like the conversation shifts to that the fact that it's happening rather than the why behind it.
Yep.
So, I mean, at this point, it is hard, and it is almost like walking on glass for a lot of things. Because I even have another friend, a white friend of mine, and she is married to a Black man, and she's been getting so much crap for standing up for Black Lives Matter because she's a white girl, and how can you possibly understand? But that in and of itself is like, well, okay, but that's we keep shifting the conversation. It's not getting to the root cause and why. Like, I feel like as a white person, it is my duty to be on your side and to say, like, I have empathy for this this movement and everything, and we should not be like this.
No,
I don't know.
it's an
What are your
avoidance.
thoughts?
Yeah, it's an avoidance tactic. When you don't want to avoid something that's uncomfortable for you, you have to set up barriers. And when you set up barriers to communication, you're really impacting things. Because if we can't communicate, if we can't talk to one another, we're never going to be able to move forward. And that's simple. I mean, I have friends from every different race, every different culture. And when we sit together, we have conversations that would make some people just cringe because we're very honest and open. Now, you have to have that trust to do so.
Absolutely.
Which I understand, and it takes time to build that trust, but you only build that trust through having conversations, and
Right.
by also stating your position when you go into those conversations, and knowing that you're in a safe place to do so. And I think we have to do more of that as a society.
So, coming off 2008, when I thought it was just an amazing, amazing occurrence for the United States to elect a Black president. And Barack Obama, who I'm a big fan of, probably didn't do enough, but did a lot to help relations. How did we get in 3.5 short years from then so backed up and in such bad shape?
Well, I always like to say these things in the most simplest way possible.
Okay.
When Barack Obama was voted in, his votes came through hope, and people showed up and voted because they had great hope and change and an opportunity to have someone in there that was different, that looked like them, that was also articulate and well educated, but there was hope. When we look at this last election, people didn't have hope, so they didn't show up to the voting booth. They did not come out and address their concerns through their vote. And that's one of the things we have to do now is people need to show up and vote. I'm afraid that we're going to end up in the same situation for another 4 years if people sit back and think their vote doesn't count. They need to look back again in history and see how their vote counted back in 2008 and show up in 2020.
Well, and if you look at the present situation, as I do, and I'm not a fan of it, it was 150,000 votes that were redistributed in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and we're in a different situation today.
Yep.
And I'm not going to say that Mr. Floyd's life wouldn't have been ended because there's a challenge when it comes to policing, but the whole country, I think, is looking at a different situation. And to quote Michael Shea from Saturday Night Live, he said, "I don't think Mr. Trump is a racist, but I know some of his supporters are." And when in 2009, when Barack Obama became president, a lot of people out there who were big time politicians this day had a meeting and said, we are going to oppose everything Barack Obama wants to get done. And those people are very big time politicians these days. So there was a certain amount of racism that went on above the line, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to be the true great country that we want to be and that we believe we are, that has got to change.
I'm behind you 100%. But to get to that point of change, we got to be able to share with one another our thoughts. We got to share with each other our experiences, because we're not that different. We want the same things in our lives. I don't understand trying to create barriers for somebody that wants the same thing I have. We don't want to take away from anybody as communities. We just want to participate in our society. We want to participate as equals. We want to be able to go where we want to go safely and not be concerned. We want to share. And there's so many beautiful things from both sides that can be shared. I mean, everybody likes to eat. And I always say to people, food is one of the great conduits of our society, and we do. People share in foods, and they eat different foods from different countries, and they enjoy it thoroughly. But you bring those people that created those cuisines together, and you have conflict. It doesn't make a bit of sense. You can go eat Chinese food, but you don't like Chinese people. You love Indian food, but you don't like Indian people. You eat African food, oh, that's really unique and different, but you don't like African people. It just doesn't make sense to me. They're building a wall, and if they took all the tacos and burritos off the street in the United States on the other side of the wall, people would go berserk. But you don't care about the people that bring those cuisines to us. I just really don't understand that, and we have to change that.
Well, I think one thing that you said just in this whole conversation that stood out to me was when you said, let them see color. And that's a beautiful statement, because again, it's that, you kind of walk on eggshells and everything, and you're like, I don't know the right thing to say, but those are it's okay to see that we're different. We didn't have a choice on the color of our skin. None of us did, but it's all beautiful. We didn't have, I'm female, you're male, and I want you to see the difference. So then that's a really good point, that
within reason.
Not all the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
G-rated show. I mean,
how bland would it be if we all had to wear the same thing every single day? If we all had to walk a certain way every single day? There would just be no thrill and no excitement to going through this process we call life. Difference is energy. Difference is joy and fun. I mean, you want to have something to talk to people about. You want to have something to share with people that, brings you some semblance of joy throughout your day and your lives. And, being the same, doesn't do it. It doesn't do that outside of, the things that we can be different with.
Right.
But
Well, I mean, there's one thing in Utah: you're either blue or red, BYU or Utah.
What's funny about that? It's for the fans that's the case, and a few of the players, but for the most part, we as players we all got along. So sometimes after the BYU football game or the Utah football game, we all hang out a little bit, and
That's awesome.
people just didn't know that what's going on now. That way,
yeah, athletes. I love it after being a sportscaster. Where the fans take this much more seriously than the players. And a lot of the older sports radio fans hate it that the players get together in NFL and pray after the game. The Christians do,
yeah,
and that they're shaking hands and doing this. One of the Michael Jordan documentary, he was so upset at Isaiah Thomas. And with the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Northern Utah, we had one of our kids go visit with Isaiah, and Isaiah spent 2 hours with this young man before a game. I will never say another bad thing about Isaiah. But, the idea of athletes having a common theme.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we've run out of time, young lady.
I know we have. But
you've done too good a job.
Thank you. Shawn, thank you so much for coming on and talking and telling us your story and everything. This has been really, really, really good. I've really enjoyed this show.
I appreciate
and Shawn, we'll have you come down to the studio sometime, and whatever food you want to pick up,
we will eat it.
Great.
We will enjoy.
Great.
Thanks so much for being on the show.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you for having me.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting, and we will see you next week.
On Monday.
On Monday. On Tuesday. Bye.